of the questions, don't you? You like asking them better than answering them. But today we're gonna turn the tables on you a little bit. And Bob, I want to start with you because you did a fantastic job with the debate this year with President Obama and Senator McCain, and then he did, I'm sure you saw, I'll sit down, yeah, a great interview with President Obama last week that was really good, and you asked some tough questions that I think needed to be asked. When you get an opportunity like that to sit down and talk with the president, how do you know how far to go when you're asking questions? I mean, how do you know? See, I'm going to ask Helen this too, but how do you know how far to push? You're giving an opportunity. You know, not everybody gets that, to sit down and talk with the chief. How do you know where to go?
Sky's the limit.
I just think to myself, what would Helen Thomas do? Can I tell you all that I'm truly honored to be here to receive this award, but what makes it kind of extra special for me is that Helen was the first reporter that I met when I came to Washington in 1969, and she truly has been kind of an inspiration and a guide for me down through the years, because Helen has always remembered the first rule of covering people in power, and that is don't let them scare you. And to my knowledge, none of them have yet scared Helen Thomas. So I'm really proud to be here with Helen and to be with all of you.
Well, I don't think that the president was probably afraid, but I mean, when you're sitting there talking to him and you know you've got to get to some tough issues, is there a point where you say, I may be going too far, I need to stop here?
Well, I try to get the answers, and you know, I mean, that's what interviewing is all about. And what I tell young reporters, so many young reporters are so worried about how the question is going to sound, or they'll think, well, they'll probably think I'm dumb if I ask that question. I don't. I always ask the obvious questions first, because every time I've ever been scooped, or every time somebody got a story that I didn't have after I'd talked to that same person, it's because I assumed that I knew what the answer would be that they would give. So I try to listen to what they're saying. I kind of have, you know, some questions in my mind or written down to ask, but once I ask that first question, generally the next question is going to be based on just what I heard them say. And I think it is possible. I don't like abusive kind of interviews. I don't think the purpose of an interview is for the person doing the interview to be showing off. I think it's to try to elicit information. And, you know, like on Face the Nation on Sundays, if I ask a question and they avoid it, I try to ask it in another way, and then I ask it a third time and I don't get an answer. I generally just go on to something else, because a non-answer is an answer. And people understand when they're avoiding the questions, and I don't think it helps them when they do.
And did you enjoy interviewing President Obama?
Yes, he is a very interesting person. He's, you know, he is, all other things beside the point, one of the most interesting figures on the political scene in a long, long time. I mean, this campaign that we saw was truly historic. We talk about him being the first African American and all of that is true. But the other part is, you know, our campaigns were getting to the point they were all on television. They were television, you know, these television commercials, these awful television commercials. And Barack Obama brought back crowds. He brought back public rallies. We hadn't seen that in a long time. And as a writer, he is a good speaker. Rhetoric does count. And all of our great presidents generally have been those that have been able to communicate with the American people. And we saw his ability to do that. I mean, that's how he got elected. There's no question about that. So I found it as a reporter just fascinating to get to be there. And then on Inauguration Day, it was one of the most unbelievable sights I've ever seen, to sit up in that anchor booth just right off Pennsylvania Avenue. We had 2 million visitors come to Washington, the largest group of people that have ever come there for anything. And do you know there was one arrest that day? Now, at the Super Bowl, they had about, what, 75,000 people there, and I think there were 78, 79 people that were arrested. Now, they didn't close the bars in Washington either. You know, one person was arrested that day, which just gave you an idea of kind of the spirit that kind of came over the city. Now, it may not have lasted long, but for one brief shining moment, there it was, and it was just thrilling for me to be able to be there.
And Helen, in all the presidents that you have interviewed over the years, how have you refined your technique? And what is it that where you know you've gone too far?
Well, first I'd like to say my greatest admiration for Bob. He sounds so gentle, but he goes for the jugular. And they don't even know it's happening to them. But he's truly a nice guy in every sense of the word. Nobody can ever say anything. And they keep kicking him upstairs even when he wants to leave. So he's wonderful. In terms of your question.
And interviewing all of these presidents, I asked Bob when he knows, the feeling that you've gone too far. Maybe I should pull back. How do you know where that point is?
I start out with the premise that they all hate us. Then it becomes mutual. No, I mean, my feeling is that a president is our public servant. I pay him, you pay him, and so forth. They don't walk on water. As far as I'm concerned, they are accountable. They have life and death in their hands, our lives. And so I think they should always be asked very penetrating questions. They should always be accountable, and they should always have to explain why we go into war.
You've never been afraid or intimidated by a president.
No, but you're not intimidated by them because they beg for your vote. They bankrupt their friends